Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting of the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council to order. My name is Bob Ballou. I serve as chair of the council on behalf of DEM Director Terry Gray. We have a quorum tonight and we're ready to conduct our business. We are working off in a draft agenda, and item 1 on the agenda is the agenda itself. Does any member of the council have any recommended changes or addition to the agenda? Seeing none, is there any objection to adopting the agenda as proposed? Seeing none, the agenda as proposed stands approved by consent. And we're on to item 2, which are the meeting minutes from the last meeting. It's hard to believe that was back in April 26, 2022. The meeting minutes have been provided to the council members. Are there any recommended modifications to those meeting minutes? Seeing none, is there any objection to approving those meeting minutes, the meeting from April 26, 2022? Seeing no objection, those meeting minutes stand approved by consent. And we are on to item 3, which is public comment on any matters not on tonight's agenda. So this is an opportunity for any member of the public that's here tonight to address the council on any item that, or any matter that is not on our agenda this evening. And I'm going to ask every one of Dr. Rice's students to please stand up and offer comments to the council on the issues that you deem important. I'm just kidding. But you're welcome to offer any comment if you would like. Would anyone like to offer any comment? Seeing none, thank you all for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we hope you get some benefit from this experience tonight. Next on our agenda is an FYI. It is the resignation of Chris Rein, who's been a long-standing council member, and I know I speak for the entire council when I say that it was really a pleasure working with Chris over the years. I know he's had some challenges that he's been facing, and as a result, he felt compelled to submit his resignation. That letter, although it's not dated in the meeting materials, it was received on September 1, 2022. So we are a council of 8 members right now instead of 9. That position will be, the division will solicit candidates to fill that position, and those recommendations will be provided to the governor, and the governor will make an appointment, and that appointment will be subject to advice and consent by the Senate. So that'll be the process we will follow to fill the seat vacated by Chris Rein. And if anyone has any recommendations, please forward them to the Division of Marine Fisheries. We would certainly be more than happy to entertain suggestions for that seat. Item 5 is the 2023 Sector Management Plan, and I'll look to John Lake to brief the council on that. John?
Yeah, sure. So you have it in your e-packet. It's this year's plan that provides a breakdown of each of the fishery stock status and recommendations from the division on its management, as well as any recommended changes to the licensing ratios and how many of the licenses would be issued under the current scheme. So feel free to look at it, to look up things like how many people participated in any species, how many pounds landed, all that good stuff.
Thank you. Good resource document done annually. Any questions for John? Seeing none. Approval plan. Is there, I'd entertain a motion to approve the 2023 Sector Management Plan. So moved by Dave Monty and seconded by Dr. Rice. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, is the council ready for the question? If so, all in favor, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous. It would be 6-0 in support. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6-0 in support of the motion to approve the 2023 Sector Management Plan. Item 6 on our agenda is the Shellfish Advisory Panel meeting minutes from their last meeting on September 28th, 2022. I think Katie's just going to provide a very brief overview. Katie?
We had a meeting on September 28th, and if nobody has any questions, I'd like to just approve them because we will be going over it basically. I think the staff weighed in on almost every one of the agenda items, so I can speak to those when they come up.
Yeah, I think that.
So if anybody does have any questions.
Yep, I think Katie's recommendation is a good one. She'll speak to each of the SAP's recommendations for each issue that we're about to address. In the meantime, are there any questions on the report itself? I thought Anna did an excellent job putting it together. Thank you, Anna. And I would entertain a motion to approve the SAP meeting minutes from September 28th, 2022. Moved by Dr. Rice. Is there a seconded by Jason Jarvis? Discussion on the motion, seeing none. All in favor, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous 6-0. which moves us, we're moving along quite well, thank you. We're on to item 7, and that is the shellfish harvest seasons for Greenwich Bay, Bristol Harbor, and Bissell Cove, Fox Island shellfish management areas, otherwise known as the winter harvest areas. So Anna, would you like to provide a briefing to the council on this?
Yeah, so the staff discussed the harvest schedule for this winter for sub areas 1 and sub areas 2, and came up with a schedule which is highlighted here on this next slide, and accounts for the allowed 48 hours of total available harvest in December, and the schedule will be these very specific days that are listed on the slide. You should have also received this information in that as well. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Anna? Katie, how did the SAP, what was the SAP's recommendation on the Greenwich Bay sub-areas 1 and 2 harvest?
They, I guess, so it's at 4 hours a day. They approved to have, there would be, 48 hours, it's 12 available days to harvest, barring any happen train closure. But they voted to approve all 12 days. And I think, looking, it's here, I think it starts the 14th on it.
Yep, December 14th, that would be the first day.
Okay, perfect. Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah, so.
Okay, so the SAP proposal is essentially before the council for consideration. Is there any public comment on the SAP's proposal regarding the winter harvest schedule for Greenwich Bay sub-areas 1 and 2? Seeing no comment, back to the council for discussion and or a motion on this. Anyone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the staff proposal.
Moved by Katie Egan. Is there a second? Seconded by Travis Barrow to recommend to the director adoption of the staff proposal for the Greenwich Bay sub-areas 1 and 2 harvest schedule. I think that is almost exactly the language that Nicole just popped up. So thank you so much, Nicole. Discussion on the motion? If not, is the council ready? Is there anyone on Zoom that has indicated an interest in commenting on this? I'll look to Nicole on every issue. And if folks are listening in to this meeting on Zoom and you wish to comment on any item tonight, please use the raise hand feature and Nicole will let me know that you have an interest in weighing in. Has anyone indicated? That being the case, is the council ready for the question? If so, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous 6-0. And Anna, we have the next one, I think.
Yeah. So the next one.
No questions?
So you should have seen in the SAP minutes in your e-packet, the Shellfish Advisory Panel also discussed the winter harvest schedule for Bissell Cove, Fox Islands, along with Bristol Harbor. And they recommended to use the same schedule as Greenwich Bay for Bissell Cove and Fox Island. So that would be the same date, starting December 14th, a total of 48 hours for the month of December. And that was approved by the panel. The next one was,
So just to pause for a second. So for Bissell Cove, Fox Island,
Yep.
it would be the same schedule, winter harvest schedule as Greenwich Bay,
As Greenwich
areas
Bay.
1 and 2.
exactly.
And the SAP recommended adoption of that to the council. And why don't we take that, and then we'll have Bristol Harbor will be last, right? So
Yes.
why don't we do, why don't we pause right now, and we'll do Bissell Cove, Fox Island, Harbor Schedule. Is there anything to add? I mean, the SAP has recommended, I know we don't have the slide up yet, but I'm guessing Nicole's working on it, but the recommendation to the council is to adopt the same schedule for December 2022. Is there any, yes, Dave?
So move.
Move to, and seconded by Andy. So moved by Dave Monte, seconded by Andy D'Angelo to recommend to the director adoption of the December 2022 winter harvest schedule for Bissell Cove, Fox Island, as proposed by the SAP. Discussion on the motion? Is there any public, Travis?
Yeah, Katie, maybe just, there was one opposed at the SAP meeting, I was just curious what.
There was one opposed for Bissell Cove, Fox Island, and he didn't give any reasoning for the opposition.
Would anyone from the public like to comment on the motion before the council, either here tonight or on Zoom? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It's unanimous 6-0, and the last of the three is Bristol Harbor, I believe. Anna?
Yes, so the staff decided to make a motion to recommend to maintain the current default schedule for Bristol Harbor.
Thank you, and that is in your meeting materials, that default schedule. We could run through it if anyone wants us to, but it's the current season that we can carry forward. Questions for Anna, and was there anything from the staff on this other than a recommendation to the council to maintain the current default schedule? Questions from the council? Any member of the public wishing to weigh in on this issue? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. I'm sorry, we need a motion. A motion to approve, that would be moved by Katie Egan, seconded by Andy D'Angelo to recommend to the director approval of the, or I should say adoption of the Bristol Harbor harvest schedule. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It's unanimous 6-0. Thank you very much. And I know the SAP weighed in on another issue, but we'll get to that briefly. And I think that covers the item 7. Is that correct? We're done with item 7, and we are on to item 8, which is Greenwich Bay sub-areas 1 and 2 commercial shore digging possession limit. Anna, would you please speak to this for the council?
Yes, so it was brought to our attention that there was a need for clarification in the language in the regulations for Rule 4.12.1D1 regarding the Greenwich Bay Subarea 1 and 2 commercial shore digging possession limit. And the division presented what they would propose as the new language. It was only a couple of alterations that were made. And this is just to clarify the fact that Greenwich Bay sub-areas 1 and 2 commercial shore digging for bay quahogs, soft shell clam, blue mussel surf clam, and oysters was 3 bushels per person per day. So adding in that word commercial shore digging was the key to making the alteration for clarification.
Thank you for that. And did the staff have a recommendation on this?
They voted unanimously to
Recommend.
recommend adoption, just because of the clarification.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Questions, comments on this issue? Seeing none, would any member of the council like to make a motion regarding this issue? Travis?
Yeah, motion to adopt the new language.
Is there a second? Seconded by Katie Egan, moved by Travis Barrow, and seconded by Katie Egan to recommend to the director adoption of the proposed clarification to the shore digging possession limit in Greenwich Bay sub-areas 1 and 2. Discussion on the motion. Is there anyone from the public, would anyone from the public like to speak to this issue? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous 6-0. Which brings us to item 9, proposed regulations that have been publicly noticed. There are essentially 3 sets of items. What I'll do is I'll ask, I believe, Connor or Pete or whoever's going to drive this one. John? I'm sorry, John will drive the council through each of these issues one by one. As we do with all issues that have been out to public notice and comment, we'll first brief the council on the issue. The council has in their packet a record of the public comment provided during the public comment period. I'll look to either Connor or Jason McNamee or both to offer a division or departmental perspective on the issue. And then I'll look to the council to see if the council is comfortable moving forward with the record as it stands, or whether the council would be interested in entertaining any additional input on the council's deliberations tonight on each issue. So that's how we'll proceed one by one, and we'll start out with exit entry ratio for the Unlimited Finfish endorsement. John?
Thanks. So this is usually the main event for tonight's meeting, is to look at the ratios for releasing new endorsements, commercial endorsements. First one up for consideration is the Unlimited Finfish endorsement. So one thing to remember is that we have changed our licensing structure. We are no longer doing restricted finfish endorsements and non-restricted. They are unlimited, meaning you can have all species, and limited, meaning you can only participate in certain species, those that are not on the quota mainly. So last year it was decided to change this ratio from a 1-to-1 to a 1-to-2, meaning for every one that leaves, 2 get in. We issued 24 of these endorsements last year. This year, I've gone through the folks that did not renew their licenses, and it's been determined that 12 licenses were not renewed, just straight out retired. So under the current ratio, we would have 24 new endorsements available, just like last year. We did have a proposal at workshop to go back to 1-to-1. If that was the case, we would go to 12 new endorsements. Now, I was asked to look at where the 24 licenses participated last year, and I did do that. So I took a look. Of the 24, 13, I'll just do percents. Of the 24, 54% participated in black sea bass, consuming, all of it's less than 1% of the quota, but I'll throw it out there anyways, consuming 0.4 of the quota. Striped bass had 42% of the new licenses participate. That's 0.3 of the quota. Summer flounder had 54%, less than, it's 0.07, not big impact there. Likewise with scup, we had 42% participate, 0.004, not big dent there. Tautog, we had 21%, and they had a 0.3 effect on the quota. So of the 24 licenses, 5 of them did not participate in restricted finfish. So hopefully that's the information to help you with your decision.
Thanks. Questions for John? Seeing none. Connor, the division's perspective on this?
The division doesn't have a strong preference for either proposal, to support either. I would just note that, as John mentioned, we were previously 1-to-1, so last year was a departure from that. So going with proposal 2 would bring us back to what we were previously at, and could be perceived as a thoughtful approach as we enter the new licensing structure scheme for commercial licensing, and get an understanding of how those licenses activity are in the new license reform. So that may be something to consider in deliberations, but the long-standing debate of moving from 1-to-2 was based on trying to increase new entrants in the fishery. Obviously, that has an impact on the quota, as John has alluded to. A 1-to-1 would gravitate us back towards trying to be focus on the new entrances at a 1-to-1, plus trying to manage the quota, the current activity. So I'll leave it at that, but happy to answer any other questions.
Questions for Connor? To the council for discussion. Dave?
I'd be interested in commercial fishermen on the council, their point of view, as well as point of view from the
Thank you. First to the council, Jason Jarvis.
I just, from what I gathered from the public hearing, a lot of guys were looking to go back to 1-to-1. I think part of the reason was we ended up with the shortest striped bass season in history. It might have lasted 2 weeks. And I think part of the concern was a lot of people that wanted to get the new licenses, wanted to get it so that they could land bigger bass, whether they were selling them or not. So that was a concern. And I think with the current status of everything, I mean, I think with the guys in the bay, I know down in South Shore, fluke fishing was not bannered this year, that's for sure. So I think we don't need a lot more pressure on the fishery at this point. I think that was kind of the gist of a lot of the public hearing.
Commercial interests on the council? Katie?
I agree with Jason. I think this is maybe one-to-one is a good precautionary approach as we enter into the new licensing. Then revisit it next year.
Andy? Andy feels the same way. Travis, did you want?
Just a question.
Yeah.
So maybe for Connor, if I could.
Yeah, please.
Or John, I forget who said it. So the land, was that landings or sales when you were talking 1%, less than 1%?
That was the number of participants for, I can go through the pounds. So for black sea bass, it was approximately 4,000 pounds. For striped bass, it was approximately 3,000. Summer flounder was about 1,800. Not much on scup. The tog was 147. Scup was 100 pounds.
We don't have any way to indicate whether it was sold or just.
These are landings, these are sales. So.
Oh, those are sales, okay.
Per Dave Monte's request, any additional input from the public to the council on this issue tonight? Yes, sir. Could you identify yourself for the record?
Charlie Julian, commercial fisherman. I just want to agree with this side of the table that 1-to-1 will be best in light of the current fishing.
Thank you. McEntee, hi.
Yes, thank
Welcome.
you. Representative Carol McEntee, I'm laryngitis from knocking on doors. But I was asked to come here by several of the fishermen, and one of them being Charlie Julian, Ken Booth, and Jerry Calabro, who's also, I believe we're all in agreement that the 1-to-1 ratio, as Mr. Jarvis said, is what we would ask this council to do to preserve the small business and the livelihood of these hardworking fishermen. So I am chair of small business at the House, so anything I can do to help the small businessman, I certainly will. So I'm not saying that I wouldn't help a large businessman as well, but I want to see us work together on this and preserve what we have.
Understood. Thank you for being here tonight. I know how busy your schedule must be at this time of year. Andy?
Can I make a motion?
Yes, you, well, let me just make sure. Are there any other public comments? Ken Booth.
Ken Booth, Commercial Law and Legal Association. We are in favor of the 1-to-1. I think it's important at this juncture. We have the new license and restructuring. And what would be interesting to see is, I know John provided the data on the poundage, but it'd be interesting to see what sector that these fishermen are going into, because it'd be good to look at how we do this instead of just, we feel good today, 2-to-1 or 1-to-1, is to look at the fishery and to see what sectors they're fishing in and how can we promote more into, you don't want, I'm a rod and reeler, but you don't want all the licenses just to go to rod and reel. Once you guys make it available to get boats, get into boating, and move up the line that way. So to see if this has been effective, if the methodology has been effective in the past, or how do we change it going forward? I think it's an important thing to look at.
If you can. Anyone on Zoom with their hand up?
We do have one hand, Fred Matera. I'm gonna ask you to unmute, Fred.
Hi, Fred.
Hi. I'm a bit new to this. I've been trying to follow it on the side, but I just need to make a comment. I've done 5 years in an apprenticeship program. I fished, I'm 50 years in this game, and I fished for 40 years. And if these new people are ever going to get an opportunity to get into this industry, they have to build a track record, a record that they can take to a financial institution so they can buy a boat. Most of us that are in this game right now are just years away from bowing out. There are some young people in the game, but we need to encourage more youth. And if I struggle with this 1-to-1 to 1-to-2, trying to get more people. They need to be able to establish, if they run a boat for somebody, then they've got a couple of years under their belt where they can go to a financial institution and see what I've been able to land and what revenue I've been able to generate. If they don't have quoted species, it's going to be reduced amount. So just take into consideration, I know what everybody's concern is. Right now, they're concerned about what's going into their pocketbook, what's happening to me. If there's not enough species there and there's not enough to go around and we add more license, it's going to be carved up more pieces of the pie, and I'm going to get less and I'm going to get less revenue. But, you know, when we all started this as fishermen, we didn't have these concerns. We all went out and we caught what we could. Now we do have limitations, but I just ask you to reflect back and look and think, how do we get youth and how do we get them to move up the ladder and become boat owners themselves? Because you're going to need it. You're going to have to sell your boat at some point to someone else. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Fred, for your input. Anyone else?
Yes, question.
Yes, Travis.
Maybe for Connor. What's the total population of unlimited finfish endorsements?
It's in the sector plan. Off the top of my head, I know there's approximately 780 multi-purpose, and I'm going on the details, but I don't know, sorry.
Right. If anyone from staff can find that information before we vote on this, that would be helpful. If not, we'll follow up with Mr. Barrow with that information. Thank you. Additional comments, questions? Jason, Jarvis.
Another comment, which I guess the state won't know until January, is how many people are selling their licenses. Because I know that I think there's 6 or 7 guys in Westerly that are retiring and selling their license. They've been at it for 50 years. So, I mean, that's another piece of the puzzle, you know, and I get it, you know, what Fred said, but it's a tough balance. You know, I think we all know that. We're looking at soft shell clams now. I can't wait to see what the status of that's going to be. You know, there's not as many around anymore. So, and with the new licensing system, I think we need to wait. It's just, you know, be proactive instead of reactive.
And while it might seem like semantics, let me clarify for the record that you cannot sell a license, but you can sell a business,
Yes.
and the license comes with that sale of the
Yes.
business. Thank you. But thank you for that input, and that's a good point. There are other ways to get into the fishery other than through this exit entry ratio system. Dave Monty?
I thank the chair for getting the interview folks in the room. I'm fine.
Okay. Well, then I'll entertain a motion on the part of the council, from the council. Andy, D'Angelo?
No, I agree with a lot of what Fred said, but I think I'm gonna say we go with proposal 2, at least for a year, and look at, see what goes on after all these other things get settled.
Okay, so Andy D'Angelo recommends adoption of proposal 2, which would be a return to a 1-to-1, a return to the 1-to-1 exit entry ratio. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Dr. Rice. Discussion on the motion. Did we get an answer?
Yep, so we have 744 multi-purpose and 287 restricted finfish. So that's just about 1,000. So.
Just to clarify, so the 5 multis, that'll be open up 5 finfish licenses and then 5 shellfish.
They count towards both, correct?
Correct. And then the PEL, those are specifically PEL finfish that are staying within the finfish
Correct.
license.
Good discussion. Any further questions, comments? We have a motion to recommend to the director adoption of a 1-to-1 exit entry ratio for the unlimited finfish endorsement. Is the council ready for the question? If so, all in favor, raise your hand. And it's unanimous. No, I'm sorry, it's 5 in favor, opposed, 2 opposed. No, I'm for. You're for. So I'm going to call the question again to make sure. All in favor, please raise your hand. And I have 5. Thank you. Opposed, 1. So the motion passes 5-1 with Travis Barrow dissenting. Thank you. And we're on to the next issue, which is the exit entry ratio for the unlimited shellfish endorsement. John?
Sure. So this is for the shellfish sector now. In the past, a reminder, we used to consider quahog and soft shell clams separately. With our new licensing structure, both of those will be under the unlimited shellfish endorsement. So now it is one endorsement for all, unlimited can have all shellfish. limited shellfish endorsement would be a lot like the shellfish other. One important thing to say about the new unlimited endorsement is it also has whelk, which was also always a separate endorsement as well. So the way it used to work is we had a ratio for quahog or a ratio for soft shell clam. Whelk you could only get if you were an active fisherman in either quahog or soft shell clam. It was always open to you if you were active. So now it's all going to be under one endorsement, and there'll be one ratio for that. We put a placeholder in at our last meeting for 1-to-1, just because the new system has taken effect, so we had to have a ratio. So it's currently at 1-to-1, but it was always expected that we would reconsider it at this meeting. So I went through the licenses, we found that 29 were not renewed. We always do it in divisors of 3. So status quo will result in 30 new endorsements available for unlimited shellfish.
Thanks. Questions for John? Kitty, did the SAP have a recommendation on this?
They did. I think it was unanimous to recommend adoption.
Okay. Yep, that's right.
Of status quo. So
1-to-1.
Yes, 1-to-1.
Thank you. Anyone, Dave, would you like to have the public afforded an opportunity on that?
I'm good.
Okay, so on this one, we've had the administrative record is before the council and it's closed, and we're not entertaining any additional public input. Is there any further discussion on the part of the council?
I'll make a motion.
Dave?
To accept the 1-to-1 ratio.
Move to recommend adoption of the 1-to-1 ratio. Is there a second to that? Seconded by Jason Jarvis. So moved by Dave Monty and seconded by Jason Jarvis to recommend to the director that status quo be maintained. That is a 1-to-1 exit entry ratio for the unlimited shellfish endorsement. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, is the council ready for the question? If so, all in favor, raise your hand. And it is unanimous, 6-0. And we're on to the next and sort of final item of this suite of issues that went out to public notice and hearing, and that is the multi-purpose vessel license. John, did you want to start off, or is there? Okay.
So for the final item, so as you're aware, we have a new licensing structure in place. Part of that new structure involved a new license, the multi-purpose vessel license. We've had three workshops on this and a public hearing. So we've definitely put it out there in front of people. We have 2 proposals. One that has come from industry, which would be to amend the rule to allow for no issuance in 2023, basically to hit pause for a year. Proposal 2 is a division proposal. So we put this one together. Basically, we would like to see the regulations allow that only multipurpose vessel licenses can be issued to natural people. And that's an important point because it was determined that a corporation cannot hold any of our licenses. So a natural person who has actively fished a multipurpose fishing license and who own a commercial fishing vessel that is commercially declared. We propose that we issue 31 of these licenses for issuance, and if the number of applications exceeds the number of licenses available, we would have a lottery. That 31 is based on the number of active multi-purpose licenses that are currently out there. It's 10% of them. So we did a calculation, about 310 multi-purpose licenses are what we would consider active. That's where so we took a flat 10%, and that's where you get the 31. For accountability, we anticipate that we would need an operator permit for this license. Once again, as a reminder, this is a vessel license, which would allow the vessel owner to select any captain he wanted to run the vessel. There's certainly a need to identify these people, so we would create an operator permit for $50. And with this, if you had one of these licenses, the division would like to see a low-cost vessel monitoring system installed on the vessel. So we've had a lot of discussion. I definitely gave you the 10,000 foot view, so feel free to ask any questions.
And before I go to questions, I'd like to see if Jason Jarvis would like to offer anything.
Well, seeing that I need to recuse
Well,
myself
yes,
anyway, but yes.
that would be what I'm giving you the opportunity to do.
So I'm
State your
recusing
intent.
myself from this, and I'm gonna join the public.
Thank you. So Jason Jarvis has stated his intent to recuse from this deliberations on this matter. He will be taking a seat in the public, and if the council is interested, they can entertain any comments from Jason. When we get to that part of the meeting, Jason will be submitting his recusal form to Joe Bianco, legal counsel to the council, and Jason's decision, I believe, is based on his participation in the public hearing process. And we appreciate that input, very substantial input provided during the public comment process. I now go to, and I will be going to the public.
A point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Jerry Carmel.
Jason is a member of the council,
Yes, he is.
and he represents the view of hundreds of commercial fishermen.
Yes.
And are you telling me that he just recused himself? Does that mean he's not allowed to vote on this issue?
That is correct.
Is that his decision, or
Yes,
is it a
it is.
decision of the council?
It's Jason's decision.
And
It's
if he
based on,
can't, if he's on that council representing me and hundreds of other fishermen, and he recuses himself, who's there to represent us?
well, first of all, I don't feel it's appropriate to get into the details of why he chose to recuse. I will note that it is council policy in writing that if any council member wishes to participate in the public hearing process, they are welcome to do so, provided they then recuse when it comes before the council. Otherwise, there'd be an inherent conflict of interest. You would already have expressed your comments on the record, and you couldn't be objective as a member of the council in weighing the public record if you've already commented. So I believe it's for that reason that Mr. Jarvis says.
Well, I don't agree with that. His presence on that council represents the points of view of hundreds of licensed commercial fishermen. And to have him remove himself, either, I don't know who advised him to do so, but to have him remove himself removes the vote. I want to hear his opinion, sitting up there in that council, not sitting in the audience as a non-council member.
Understood, but you also have to understand that it's his decision to recuse. Thank you. I would now like to go to Connor for the division's perspective on this issue. Connor?
So while the division supports proposal 2, at this time, the division could support either proposal 1 or proposal 2. I won't reiterate too much of what John said, but just for further context, proposal 2 is the genesis is from ultimately the licensing bill that was put forth that established the multi-purpose vessel licensing statute. The division worked to try and craft regulations that would, if the council chose and the director chose, would allow for a multi-vessel license to be created, again, with the ultimate goal of trying to provide increased flexibility for commercial harvesters. At this point, the support for proposal 1 is primarily from the standpoint of much of which we have worked on for proposal 2 has not been, in my opinion, fully reviewed or received full feedback from the commercial industry. We have not gotten the feedback we need as a division on very specific elements of the proposal, which are really important for us to have moving forward. If the council were to recommend proposal 1, I would hope that in doing so, that over the course of the next year, the members would be engaged with their constituents as well as with us in trying to understand and craft elements of this that they would allow us to maybe see it forward or provide constructive feedback on the regulation itself. Much of the details within this proposal have not received great feedback from industry thus far, and which I believe allows for proposal 1 for us to further vet the language as we move forward. Again, much of what we've received back from industry has not been guidance as to specific language that we put forth, of which we were trying to do in the order of making a multi-purpose vessel license that, again, provides increased flexibility for the industry. At this point, again, either of these proposals the division could support, but if proposal 1 is supported, we would we would hope to have further dialogue with both the council and with constituents as the details or elements of proposal 2 that we put forth. And with that, I'll pause from the division standpoint and provide Deputy Director Jason McNamee to provide additional comments from the department's perspective.
Thanks. Jason, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hi, everybody. Nice to see everyone. So I'm not speaking for or against the multipurpose vessel license or for any of the proposals. What I wanted to hit on, and I'll try to do so very quickly, is some of the, I've been tracking this process, seeing the comments. I saw some of the things that folks were saying at the public hearing, the workshops, and things like that. And so I felt it important to just talk a little bit about the process, and specifically two elements. One item that came up was the fact that this particular bill went into the budget process. And that was it was logical. You know, the main impact, aside from the restructure, which was actually taking what was there and sort of making it more streamlined, was the cost of the different licenses, which directly impacts the restricted receipt account for the DEM, and that's a budget element. And so there is a logic to why it ended up in the budget, and quite frankly, we brought the concept forward, and that was the advice we were given as to where it was most. So I just wanted to clarify that element on it. And the other is just about, I think a lot of folks felt caught off guard by the multipurpose vessel license. But in my view, I don't understand why that is, to be honest. This was a multi-year process getting to this point. It was in the original white paper that we developed on it. It was there the whole time. It was there for all of the 5-year travel that really took through the process. I talked to Ken, I talked to Jerry. In each case, the multipurpose vessel license was there. They told me they didn't like it, and that's fine. And that's, I think, the point of what I'm trying to say here. We talked to all of the main associations as we were developing the structure of the bill. There were elements that people liked, there were elements that people didn't like. It's a diverse community. People have different opinions, and that's okay. And so we cobbled it together as best we could and just kept it moving forward, knowing that there was going to be this opportunity for folks to weigh in. They're deliberately talk to the council and knock it down on its merits. That's great. That's the point of all of this. That it's okay to not like it. That's what we want to hear from you. That is the input that we're looking for. But there was nothing nefarious. I just got that sense from the way the discussions happened. It was me. I was talking to people. It was very transparent. It was there the whole time. And so nothing nefarious. If you don't like it, don't like it. That's fine. That's the point of all of this. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, Mr. Chair, to clarify that, and I send it back to you.
Thank you. Would the council be interested in entertaining additional input from any member of the public who might be here tonight wishing to weigh in?
Yes, I think that would be a very good idea. I would move that we do so.
I will do so as soon as Katie Egan weighs in, I guess, on the SAP recommendation.
The SAP, this was brought up at the Shellfish Advisory Panel, and there was a very healthy discussion. The voting members of the SAP represent every sector of fisheries, including dealers. And they voted in support of Proposal 1. It was 7 in favor, 1 abstention, to amend the rule for no issuance. And then they added to ask the council to rescind and strike the statute that authorizes multi-purpose vessel license. So I think they took it a step further to make sure that this maybe can not exist.
Thank you, Katie. So there's been a recommendation, and I will heed that, to go to the public to see if there's additional input. Before I do so, does any council member have a question or comment before I go to the public? I'll come back to the council. Would any member of the public like to weigh in? Rep McAfee.
Yes, thank you. And again, I represent Narragansett and South Kingstown, so many of the fishermen do live in my district. But I will say, Jason, about when bills go into a budget item, as a member of the General Assembly, I know how hard it is to follow, for me, even, to follow the finance of all of these bills. You get a much better hearing when you put a bill in and you go before either corporations or environment or wherever the bill would land. And the fishermen generally are there, because I've been sitting on environment for 7 years. When a fisheries bill comes up, they show up. We all know Rich Buca, several others, of course Jerry, he's shown up over the years. But many times when you bury, and that's what we call it as members of the General Assembly, bury a bill in the budget, people don't feel they get heard. And we want transparency. We want to hear what these guys are dealing with. I don't pretend to know the day in and day out of a fisherman's life. I know it's hard, and I know they love their independence. And I think by what you're suggesting to license the boat as opposed to the man or the woman, that seems to be a problem for all of them that I've spoken to. And if they feel that way, then I think we need to take a second look. I heard somebody say that we need more input. Well, there's never enough input sometimes. And with these guys, if they're busy on the ocean, they're not paying attention to what's buried in a budget item. Have you seen the budget? It's this big. It's impossible for anybody to know everything that goes on in there, unless you're on the finance committee. I'm not, but I'm on other things. But I would say to you, let these guys have their due. Put this over till another year. What are we going? So 24?
That would be proposal 1 is to no issuance in 2023, and then
So
take another look at it again.
So if there needs to be an amendment, it gives the legislature time to do that. Because if you like start on this January 1, and I want to amend because my constituents want to change, then I gotta get right to it. This is gonna be already in the works, and I'm gonna be trying to change it. So that doesn't make sense, because we don't go back until January 1, 2, 3, whatever. And then it takes us a while before we even start hearings. We start in February. So the reality of it is, if you put this in, and there's legislation that goes in to change anything you do, it's not gonna get done in sequence like it should, before January 1, because we're not in session. So, but, I can see, I've many times missed what happens in the budget item. So I can absolutely see how many of these guys would. So that's my perspective, and we would like more time. And I think there was a letter that went out by Ken, and I believe 70 of the fishermen signed onto it. So I think that speaks some volume, even though you said you have like 1,000 licenses out there.
The public hearing record is very substantial on this issue, largely in opposition.
And I do apologize for being very late to the game, and I wish I wasn't, but thank you for hearing.
Well, thank you for taking the time. Andy?
Well, I kind of agree with everybody saying that it needs more time, needs to look at it some more. And I'd like to make a motion, but I'd first like to hear what Jason has to say about this.
Absolutely. Now, Jason has already offered comments on the record that will remain as part of the record. He is being offered the opportunity to provide additional comment to the council tonight. Jason?
Again, I voiced a lot of concerns over this. One of my biggest concerns, which is, I've been fishing alongside Andy or with Andy or Russ Ben or some of these guys that have been in the game a long time. I'm almost 30 years in it now. First off, to give somebody a boat that says you'd be 18 years old or whatever, and get an operator's permit for $50. So if they're towing down the beach, they don't know where the hangs are, they don't know where the gear is. They're gonna, they'll tow through the mosquito fleet, as they call us. And I'm just saying that because of what I experienced with I managed to make quite a few friends around the country from Louisiana. I was just in Alaska, guys out of Florida who, a lot of them lost their boats. But pretty much they said once, like the catch share program went into play, a lot of owner operators disappeared and the vessels were run by just anybody. And there's documentation that shows the cost of insurance, the number of serious marine incidents, the number of deaths have gone up because you have somebody behind the wheel that is flukes. So here's $50, I'm gonna run your boat. I'd rather see them have to have a 100-ton license and random drug screening. You know, I mean, if you're gonna be running a dragger down the beach, I'm sorry. But the other part of it is just, this definitely shows a symptom of bureaucracy, and especially this system, because as Bob, as you all know, I used to be the guy yelling in the crowd, screaming at Mark Gibson. That was a long time ago. But a lot of people just don't pay attention because of work. The other part of it is a lot of this information doesn't get out to people. And I mean, a few people I told about it, and they're like, what? What is this? But then the saddest part of this for me is the people that I know that wouldn't come to the public hearing because they didn't want to speak out, because they didn't want to get blackballed and not be able to sell their fish. That was a concern, which I just witnessed with 4 guys that I know from Louisiana who spoke out against catch shares and then could no longer purchase quota. So I mean, it's a big game, it's a big ugly game sometimes, but I think number one, letting some kid run a 60-foot dragger down the beach, bad idea. You operate a permit? No, require not a license. If it's not your boat, I don't want to be in their way. I mean, I have a 19-foot skiff with a radar on it. My friends were like, why? I said, I've seen the devil coming at me. You know, you see the Luke and Sarah bearing down on you back in the day. It was like, so anyway, yeah, my vote again, just from the public hearing, was it should go back to the drawing board and even be removed from the budget amendment. The language should just disappear.
Thank you, Jason. Anyone else in the public that's here tonight that would like to comment? Yes, Jerry Carvalho.
There's a couple of items. One is, this is not a budget item. This creates a new license structure, and the impact on the budget is minuscule, means nothing. But what it does do, and that's the second point, it has a profound effect on how we manage our resource in the trade of fishing. Historically, we've licensed individuals. The individual that fishes with a hook and line has the same license as the individual operating an 82-foot vessel. And they're subject to the same laws, the same restrictions, the same behavior. What this proposal did, or does, is allows an industry that owns several vessels to decide who is licensed to fish or not. Now, John can tell them, well, they'll have to buy a permit. This is not the federal waters. This is not the federal government. Rhode Island is unique in the trade of fishing, and it's unique from all the other states. Operating in the trade of fishing in Rhode Island is, historically, it's written in King Charles's Charter, and it's written in our Constitution. Other states do not have that kind of protection. What we don't want to do is take what is an individual right of participation and pass it to some corporate entity, and they decide who's going to do it. And that's basically what would happen. You can put all the silly restrictions you want on it, coming from, the problem is once they get a foothold in it, then it won't take long for them to erase the restrictions and do it really what they want. A perfect example is what's happening to New Bedford. In New Bedford now, corporations own entire fishing fleets. And they decide who's going to fish and what they're getting paid. And the profits are going to the shareholders in New York at the stock exchange. We don't want that to happen in Rhode Island. We got fishermen in New Bedford getting 7 cents a pound is their share of the fish. We don't need that. We don't need a corporate takeover. And that's what that does. It takes it away from individual rights or individuals' participation in the trade of fishing, and it gives the General Assembly's responsibility to a corporate entity. We don't want that.
Thank you.
And the one other item was, and it wasn't emphasized because John has the responsibility to show what that division is proposing for language. But the fact is, I went to the workshops and I've spoken to the public. And the reason I'm here today is because many people have called me and asked me to speak on their behalf in strong opposition to this.
Thank you for being here and for doing that. Would anyone else like to address the council? Ken Booth?
Obviously, with Jerry attended the workshops, and the concerns on this, one thing I learned over the years is the worst thing we can do is pass a bad law. And this isn't a way a bad law. What it did was, and I understand Jay's perspective, how it came up, we talked about it earlier, but it wasn't fully vetted out before the law was changed. So you open the door, and then afterwards, almost anything can happen. And when it gets too far along, powers beyond this room, well beyond this room, will dictate how it happens. So if the door's been open and they walk through it, you can imagine, I've done a lot of reading down in Bedford. I mean, the impact on Galilee and the town of Narragansett of this, if you carry this out 5 to 10 years, is huge. The economic impact is much more than a license change, and it changes our fishery. And I don't know, is there a plan to change the fishery? Does DEM have a master plan to change to a corporate structure to eliminate? Because if we don't, these are type of things should be vetted and talked about prior to making the change. Because the need for this, again, in all the workshops, it was, where's the need? What do we need to change it for? What's failing, or what's going to benefit from it? And that hasn't been brought up or discussed. So I think to the proposal one, to put it off and carry it through. I remember, Bob, when we had the sector allocation issues, huge issues. It was fully vetted out, the pluses and the minuses. That's missing here. And I think that's what has everybody very concerned as to why is that missing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just to touch on what these two gentlemen just said. Being a fisherman in Rhode Island is a way of life. And I think what we're all afraid of is that that's going to take us, especially all of the supporting businesses too. That changes a lot.
Thank you all for your input. Is there anyone on Zoom that has their hand up?
We did have a hand up, but he put his hand down. Fred, if you wanted to speak, just put your hand back up and I can unmute you.
If Fred's hand goes up, I'll call upon him. If not, I'll bring this back to the council for discussion. He did go back up. Fred, it sounds like you do want to weigh in, and you're welcome to do so now.
I just wanted some clarity, some questions, and maybe Bob or John can clear it. I'm assuming that available to natural persons who holds an actively fish, that bullet number 1 is to move away from these things being assigned to vessels as opposed to an individual, correct? That's in lieu of that, correct?
Yeah, Connor's going to answer your question, Fred. Go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, Fred, I think what you're saying is correct. It would go to a person. It's not on.
Right.
It has to go to a person.
It would not go to a vessel.
That's correct. The ability to have additional people captain the boat would be via the operator permit and the multi-purpose vessel license being tied to the owner.
Correct, okay. And the bullet 4, they'd have to have a VMS on board, but that doesn't, I still have a multi-purpose. I'm certain I don't need a VMS on an 18-foot skiff. This is it mandatory, or is there some language that you will add there, device on these vessels over 40 feet or something like that?
At this point, it would be mandatory regardless of the vessel size.
Are you serious? For an 18-foot skiff?
At this point, we received 0 feedback on the VMS to this point.
So I hope you all realize that's ludicrous. I mean, that's just you need to have a vessel size at least in that. So, okay. Other than that, I don't have anything else to say other than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred, for your input. I'll bring this back to the council. Dr. Rice, do you want to offer a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt proposal 1.
Is there a seconded by Andy D'Angelo? So moved by Dr. Rice and seconded by Andy D'Angelo to recommend to the director adoption of proposal 1, which would amend the rule to read no issuance of any multi-purpose, to recommend to the, I'm sorry, let me start over again. The motion would be to recommend to the director adoption of proposal 1, no issuance in 2023 for the multi-purpose vessel license. Discussion on the motion. Dr. Rice?
Yeah, I think some of the discussion about corporate invasion of the fishery, I think drives home. Jerry Carvalho is somewhat of a legal aficionado. I think there is a case called Santa Clara County v. Southern Pacific Railroad on corporate personhood. And I think that this has a good deal of bearing on this.
Thank you. Additional comments or deliberation by the council on the motion before the council?
I guess just one thing,
Travis?
From a council perspective, I just, what are we gonna do from now until 12 months from now? I just don't want to be sitting here 12 months from now having the same discussion.
I think that's a fair question. I'll note that part of the SAP's recommendation was to recommend a legislative approach to amend that has not yet been incorporated into the motion before the council. Connor, do you have a thought, or Jason McNamee, on how the department or division might respond if the director were to agree to not move forward consistent with the council's motion? What would then follow? Has that been thought through yet?
I guess I'll answer first. What I would hope is that the council or constituents would look through the proposed regulation and identify, besides from philosophical purposes, what elements do not work. And we just heard one from Fred. Jason brought others about other elements about the operator permit that deserve discussion further if this were to move forward. So whether that's via public, comment to us directly as we go through another cycle of this next summer or next year, I would hope that we could flush those out further. From the division's perspective, that's how I would see moving forward. I will say we did have 3 workshops on it. We had a public hearing, we had a public comment period. So I would, through those elements, we didn't get specific detailed feedback on elements. So we'd have to think about other ways to solicit that feedback. But that would be what we would do from a division standpoint in regards to between now and next year, to address some of the concerns that have been expressed tonight as it relates to the actual language and elements within the regulation. I'll pass it to Jason regarding elements higher than that.
I don't have anything to add.
All right, Travis, did that answer your question?
I guess just logistically, Mr. Chair, how would we keep track of that stuff?
Well, I would think it would be incumbent upon staff to keep, well, first of all, if it goes through the standard cycle, there would be ample advance notice regarding workshops that would be scheduled. Council members are invited to participate in workshops. There is no conflict of interest in council member participation in workshops. It's when it gets to the public hearing stage that we have some rules that are self-induced. That said, there would be ample notice to the council that this is going back through a regulatory cycle with workshops to be followed by public notice, public comment, public hearing. So at least that would be what I hear Connor saying is from the division's perspective. If anything else were to happen in the State House, I mean, that's outside of our purview right now, and we can't speak to what may or may not happen legislatively.
If it doesn't get settled where it's at where we are right now, we continue it again.
We could, and I will say in the wisdom of the General Assembly, when I read the provision that is in the statute, it says the director has the authority to set the number of licenses. Therefore, that number can be 0, and that could be done year after year after year. So there is a mechanism in the statute to allow this to be continued as it currently is being recommended for 2023, and that conceivably could be carried forward for subsequent years as well. So there's not a need to amend, as I see it, not a need to amend in statute, although that could be an approach. But it could come back and be essentially a deja vu next year if, and I don't know how things would play out over the next year.
Depends on the fisherman.
It does. So clearly, this is something that needs more. Dave.
I'm certainly ready if you'd like to call the motion, I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we had a thorough discussion. It sounds like we have, so if everyone's comfortable, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous 5-0 with one recusal. And so we are done with that matter. Jason, you're welcome to return to the table. Thank you for everyone's input and advice on this. And this will be carried forward to the director. I believe it's Thursday morning when we meet with the director to convey the upshot of this meeting. So with that, we're at essentially our last agenda item, and that regards the Industry Advisory Committee. And I think, Connor, did you want to begin the discussion on this?
Yeah, sure. So as many of you know, we have the Industry Advisory Committee that's, really designed to try and provide feedback on these elements that we've discussed today. Exit entry ratios, licenses, tier elements. We've had a real struggle convening a quorum for the IAC, which makes it challenging to get that expertise from them on topics like these, as well as feedback on the sector plan and other elements that we've historically done. And this isn't like we had this discussion last year as well. This isn't a 1 year challenge. We've had this now for 3, 4, 5, 6 years now, trying to get or 4 years now, trying to get an IAC meeting together. Ultimately, there's a number of paths forward we can discuss here. One element is trying to revive the IAC, and that would be in concert with finding a new chair, as Chris Rein was the chair of the IAC. So to the members of the council, if that's a path forward you want to go, we would look for someone to step up into the IAC chair role and look through membership and try and figure out ways of which we can improve that process. I will say too, the IAC has been historically really helpful with the new workshop pattern as well. That's also provided an opportunity for ample feedback, which maybe wasn't there 10, 15, 20 years ago. So that's another tool that we have that's been provided input on these matters, as seen in as reflected in various documentation and discussions. So one option is to decide what we want to do with the IAC. Has it been useful to you? Do you want to try and revive it? We've tried a few years now in a row. It's not been successful. The other option too is to look at the legislation and really evaluate the utility of the IAC and whether that's something we want to have in there or in keep with the workshop structure. Of course, the council could always build a committee as they saw fit. There's nothing that would stop them from that, but the IAC is in statute, so the question would be, if we don't find it useful, is that something worth the department pursuing to remove, and then ultimately could always bring it back as an advisory committee for your guidance and your authority. So I'll pause there. I know that was a lot, but the summary is we've had a really hard time populating the IAC to provide you all guidance and us guidance on very important fisheries topics, and we're seeking your input on how you'd like to move forward.
And as Connor indicated, this is essentially the exact same discussion that took place exactly 1 year ago. I went back and reviewed the record, and this council met. Dave Monti chaired the meeting. I wasn't available for that meeting, and there was a brief discussion at the end about regarding the council's interest in considering a legislative proposal to address the IAC and other council-related issues. Some of them involving term limits, others involving obsolete language that is still in statute. And as I reviewed the record just today, the sentiment of the council at that time 1 year ago was, yes, let's move forward and take a look at a draft bill. Just given the quirks of the legislative process, that bill never emerged. So speaking to Connor's second option, that could be a sort of a rehash that the council again concurs with the idea of addressing this issue via legislation. And if I had to guess what that might look like, it would be a repeal of the IAC, but a granting of authority to the council to establish any advisory panels that the council may see fit. We all know that the Shellfish Advisory Panel is very active and remains so. That's not from statute, that's from the council's interest in having a standalone Shellfish Advisory Panel. The same could be done with something like the IAC if the council saw fit. But right now, the council's bound by what's in statute. So I just wanted to reiterate and sort of build on Connor's point and look to the council now for a good discussion on which of the two options do you think is the best way to go with regard to the IAC and then potentially with regard to a broader set of issues that might lead to, say, a draft bill being brought before you at your next meeting. Which of those two directions do you favor? And I just want to open it back up for discussion. Thoughts on this? Dave?
I like the idea of the council having the ability to establish ad hoc committees. I guess that would be the case, but you could see that maybe in the future we have an aquaculture ad hoc committee. Maybe we have a recreational fishing ad hoc committee, whatever the need might be. It does seem that it is an obstacle. It presents a challenge when we try to staff a committee such as this. I know that industry had really objected somewhat when we eliminated all the other advisory panels that we had. And I'm kind of disappointed that this one doesn't have the participation. I don't know what the solution is to reviving, but I do know, and I feel comfortable that ad hoc committee can be established as we see fit. So I would be for exploring, taking the next step and exploring the
Connor, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just a quick response to Dave. That ability, I believe, exists already.
Yeah.
Build committees, so
Right.
we should be all set there. The question is,
I understand.
by statute, should we be required to have the IAC, in which we have this perpetual vacant or lack of meeting quorum?
I was just sharing that I like the idea that we have that ability to establish that.
Thank you, Dave, for that. Other thoughts on this issue? Again, it's really fairly binary because either we seek to revive the IAC, which means a new chair and trying to poke the members who to date, or at least the past several years, have not been very responsive, or we take a fresh start via a new legislative approach to the matter. And depending on what the council would like to do, that will dictate how staff responds and how we set this up for our next meeting. So it'd be good to get some additional input. Jake?
I just think from the sounds of it, we have to start over. I mean, it's with a lot of the things, with anything fishing, it's like, what my friends say, it's like herding cats. So number one, picking the right time of year, to get something together. But yeah, it's not easy. I mean, just getting us to sit here some nights is tough, and it's not that often. So I think probably do have to amend it and figure out a different route.
And to that point, if the council concurs with what I'm hearing from Jason and Dave, as Dr. Rice knows, a former legislator, and as Rep. McEntee knows well, this is an ideal time to be thinking about draft legislation, and because the legislative session is looming, coming up in January, and we could bring back for discussion at the next meeting of the council, which I believe is late November or early December?
Late November.
Late November. Late November. So in about a month and a half or so, we could be back before you with some draft legislative language and we would have it as an agenda item. We would invite public input on that, and we would have a full vetting. I've heard that phrase used a lot tonight, and so that would be the purpose of the agenda item at our late November meeting, is to take a look at what a legislative proposal might look like. And I know for a fact that the governor's office, and that's who we would have to work with in order to get the ball rolling, would want to know, how does the council feel about this? This is a bill that would amend the council's enabling statute, and therefore it seems absolutely necessary to get a sense from this council as to, do you have an appetite for this approach? And I'm hearing 2 yeses so far, and I'm seeing a bunch of nods and body language in support. So without objection, I don't think we need a vote, but I don't think we need a vote. I think we just need a sense from the council that this is something that we'd like to pursue. So I think for our next meeting, we'll bring back something that we can look at and discuss and chew over and get some public input on and move forward. So thank you for that. I think we got what we were looking for in terms of council advice on how best to move forward. And that brings us to, I believe, our final agenda item, and I've already lost, here it is, which is any other matters. So are there any other matters to be brought before the council? Seeing none, are there any questions of Dr. Rice's class? Jason?
I just have one, I didn't think
Yeah.
about it earlier. I guess it'd be for John. I'm just wondering how much fish has been left on the table this year? In other words, what do we have left to land for sea bass, fluke? It seems like the pattern is the same every year, where it comes around September and all of a sudden, all of the quotas go up. I mean, or the daily limits go up. And I mean, I know it hasn't been a banded fluke year, but I'm just concerned. I mean, how many fish are we leaving on the table? Do we have a chance of losing some of our quota coming next year?
John?
So I don't have that information in front of me, and I'm not on the QM team actually, so, but I can tell you that we did just up black sea bass, and there is still summer flounder to be caught. We are adjusting our limits accordingly. We did hear some proposals at the workshop last week for next year, especially for summer flounder. But yeah, I don't, as far as how many pounds are left, I don't have that. I can tell you that we are behind, especially at sea bass. So.
Great. Thank you.
Connor?
I was just going to add too, it's a good question. I don't have the numbers, but there are other elements where we saw an increase in quota for both species, so that plays into our utilization of the quota. And two things to think about. One, as John noted, we're currently in the cycle now for proposals to amend blue scup, black sea bass, commercial possession, starting possession limits, seasons, etc. So if you have feedback as to thoughts of starting at different possession limits or whatnot, definitely make sure to send those to us soon, I guess. I think we're looking to submit Friday for that part of the cycle, so that would be excellent. And we will work to get that into the next hearing process. The other element too is that another future decision for the council is the aggregate program. That's the summer, I guess, or what's now we call the pilot ag, which you guys will all be voting on probably sometime in March, which will also theoretically have an impact on quota utilization and access. So for 2023, those are two elements that I would keep in mind.
Thanks. Jason McNamee?
Yeah, so just the other element that you brought up, Jason, was about this potential loss of quota from lack of performance. And so I just wanted to add two quick things. One is there's nothing imminent like coming up, at the federal level that's going to take quota away from us if we're not performing. We want to perform better. So, everything that Connor just talked about, I think is important. So let's try to devise ways to perform better on these quotas. But I wanted to give you some assurance that there's nothing coming that's going to take any quota away from us. And it's not unique to us either. This is sort of like inflation. It's sort of everywhere where there's underperformance for a whole host of reasons. So, just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Anything else? I'll just take a minute to welcome and introduce to many of you somebody who you might not know. Molly Ogren is in the director's office. I realized that we used to go around the room and introduce all the DEM staff. Now everybody's become so familiar. We're on a first name basis. I neglected to note our new member of the, she's not really new to the director's office. She's been on board for, I guess, a couple of years now, 2 or 3. Just one. It seems longer than that, but it's been awesome, and her portfolio is growing and increasingly involving fisheries and seafood issues. So if you haven't already said hello to Molly, please introduce yourself and get to know her. She's going to be a really strong member of our team moving forward. So with that, if seeing no other business to come before the council, is there any objection to adjourning? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Thanks very much.